side of it.
No.
And
No.
and he met all the world leaders of the
Don't
time.
do it, Andy.
What? First rule of showbiz, Chris: give the people what they want.
Well, I think we're saying the same thing.
And my mate was working at the UN. He met all the world leaders. He met the Chinese leader at the time. He said he was a very interesting man who'd, interestingly, made all of his money selling cloths for people to dry themselves with, and was still a world leader in that market. He was huge in towels.
Audience, you cannot leave unless you test negative. Run for the doors.
The Libyan leader, he gave a speech, but it was absolutely rubbish. And my mate bumped into him afterwards and said, "That wasn't very good, mate." And he said, "Well, I still got paid for it." And my mate said, "You got a fee?" Colonel.
No.
Then he met the. I don't know what stage of his career that was taken, but there must have been a moment. Do you remember how he died with the metal pole inserted where metal poles are not? There must have been a moment when he thought to himself, "Yeah, I had that coming." So my mate at the UN, he met the Zimbabwean leader at the time. It was at the fancy dress party, actually. And he looked a bit nervous, and so my mate went up to him and said, "You all right?" He said, "Well, I'm not sure about my costume." And he'd come as a highwayman, but also wearing kit that Neil Armstrong wore on his lunar mission. And he said, "My friend, do you like it?" And my mate said, "I don't know, it's a bit Robber Moon Garby." And he was a bit stressed already because he'd given a lift to the German Chancellor, but he'd had to borrow a car. He borrowed this really posh German car, a Benz, in fact, from a mate of his. But his mate was then late back from his fishing trip, and my friend described it as his Angela Merkel. But he never really recovered. He can't drive now. But I remember my mate. He was speaking to this about with the Afghan leader. He said whenever he was drunk, he always got very maudlin about the fact that he'd never be able to drive his Lamborghini again. But he came to recognise when he was really upset about something and when it was just his hammered car sigh. And he lent a car to the Spanish king, but he parked it in New York, then couldn't find it again after. They just never got it back again. And I said, "That must have been annoying." And he said, "Well, Andy, it was just one car lost." Anyway, so my mate was judging the cookery competition that the leaders held. It's a big cookery competition. And the Syrian despot, he tried this really weird recipe. He cooked a roadkill animal that he found from the English countryside, but in the style of a recipe by a famous 18th century French writer who was renowned for his pioneeringly filthy pornographic stories. Yes, he cooked them badger à l'Assad. The Russian leader, he just in the cookery competition just did some potatoes with cheese and gravy, Canadian style, and my mate said it wasn't very good, but because he's kind of intimidating, I felt I had to tell him that it was really quite tasty. Yes, I had to flatter Vladimir Putin. Oh yeah, you can't handle the truth.
I do feel, Andy, if you're having to illustrate the puns with the people so we know what you mean. The UK Prime Minister, he carved an apple Medusa for the cookery competition, but he forgot to wrap it overnight, and when he came down in the morning, it had discoloured. "Oh no," he said, "oxidation, it's turned my Gorgon brown." His predecessor happened to be there as well. He got sick. He was one of the judges. He got sick eating all the food. He ended up kind of bent double, stretched out, touched the end of his lower limb, then touched the middle of his legs and just vomited everywhere. Toe, knee, but it was won by the French president. He got a choice of prizes. They'd been donated by the top golfers from the 1960s and 70s. They'd given the items they used to keep their pets warm in, and they all had aquatic animals. He had to choose the prizes from Arnold Palmer's turtle sleeping bag, Gary Player's dolphin onesie, but in the end he went with Jack Nicklaus shark cozy.
They're actually hurting you now, aren't they?
There were other competitions as well. The British head of state was there. She was entering her pets in competitions for smartest fish and nicest reptile. But she had a bit of a problem, the Queen, with her goldfish, whose scales were looking a bit dull, and her gecko, which had halitosis. And she said to my friend, I'm going to have to sort this out. Shinier skin for my fish is my first priority, and cleaner lizard breath the second. What have I become?
What do you mean become?
There were interesting lectures too. The head of the Catholic Church, he gave a lecture about the medical issues of 17th century British poets. All of them had very embarrassing personal bodily issues. But the Pope got a bit confused. He was trying to do his speech without notes. And he said at one point, I know one of these poets from the 17th century had a scrotum-related skin issue. Another had rather troublesome wind, and one of them, who'd had 15 other health issues previously, had a curious curvature of the wang shortly before he died. But who was who? Oh, I remember now. It was Milton, eczema on his buttocks, Dryden, flatulence, and Pope Benedict the 16th, and final illness of his life.
Oh, God.
And there can be no more appropriate way to finish this gig. Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, there's a couple I haven't done on this tour. I'm going to do another.
You're joking.
No.
They also had a music video competition. The American president, he'd superimposed his vocals on pop videos by a great female vocalist of the 1980s. It was fine when he was like doing Tina Turner and Cyndi Lauper, but he couldn't really do the high notes, and he ended up getting the massive James Bond baddie from Moonraker, who had a surprisingly high falsetto voice when he sang. And he ended up doing the vocals on his cover version of Wuthering Heights. And my friend said to him, I can't believe it. Did Jaws dub you Bush? Well,
Can't believe you didn't do that one before, Andy. So good.
right. I mean, there were more.
Oh no, Andy, I'm sorry. You're so good. You're like a delicate, precious flower that's covered in toxic waste.
Fuck you! Right. Second rule of showbiz, Chris: always leave them wanting considerably less.
Achieved.
Anyway, at the end of it all, my mate bumped into the Iranian leader. He wasn't very well at the time. He had to have all his food intravenously, injected by a syringe. But he was really down and lacking in energy. And then he said, I need something to lift my mood. My dinner jab.
Whose brain works like that?
More? No, you've got to finish. Because I know when I first did the puns, it was with John Oliver, and I sometimes think, John, how would he deal with this?
No.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Come on.
Right.
I'm just trying to think. There were probably about 156 global leaders at the time.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of, I don't know, just calling my wife and children and telling them I love them.